to... I've never heard it.
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
Did everyone else hear that? It was like
yes.
some American person.
Yes.
Oh, never heard that before. So I'm going to hand over to you, Paola, now, and please begin.
Okay, thank you, Jo. Good morning, everybody. I thought to begin with, I can explain a little bit about how the team is structured and roles within the team. And then following on, Wade has sent me a series of questions which are divided in sections. So maybe what I could do is start answering the questions in each section. And then if anybody else currently has questions related to that section, we can open it up and then proceed to the next one and so on. Right, so my name is Paola Connolly. I'm the 0 to 16 Ehcp manager in the Special Educational Needs team in Windsor and Maidenhead. Just as a little bit of background, I have been working in SEND in various roles and in various local authority since about 2010. So I have a little bit of experience in different roles. I've joined Windsor and Maidenhead just over 2 years ago. And I'm one of the, if you like, one of the oldest members within the team. Our team is all quite new, however, the majority of people are really experienced and they come from other local authorities. So the team manager is David Griffiths and he manages myself. He also manages Joanna Safa, who's the PFA manager preparing for adulthood. I think she has done a similar session before, Jo told me. And she manages 2 assessment coordinators, and she also manages 2 workers that support families and young people in engaging within education, employment and training. Then we have 2 case officers that kind of deal mainly with movers in and out of borough, requests, queries and so on. And we have a tribunal and mediation officer that again is managed by David. I currently manage 4 assessment coordinators. So my team covers children from the age of 0 to 16. And their main, if you like, remit is focusing on 3 main sections, which is new assessment. So because they work with younger children, they tend to do all the new assessments. So they kind of have generally about, at the moment, about 15 new assessments that they're working on at any one time. Sorry, my bell is ringing, but somebody's going to answer it, so I don't have to, so don't worry about it. So that's that. And they also cover the phase transfers. So when a child that has an education, health and care plan is changing phases of education, for example, primary to secondary, they do that process. And that's quite a lengthy process that they work on, because although the statutory deadlines happen to be just in February from the primary to secondary and in March for post-16, it is a process that they undertake all year round. So they start in the summer term, the process, and then they take it to the end of March. And then finally, but not least, they obviously process annual reviews, and they obviously work with each complex cases as well. As I said, the team is very experienced, and I work with them in supervision once a month, so they're quite closely monitored, if you like. Okay, so that's just in a nutshell what we do. I suppose the other thing I'd like to add is that they have quite a lot of children in their caseloads. They have about 200 cases each on top of everything else. So if that's okay with you, I would like to start with some of the questions that Wei sent over. The first set of questions are related to the Ehcp process. So the first question is, what are the stages of requesting an Ehcp? So generally what happens is that the education setting identifies that the child's needs are impacting on his education. So then they put in place a graduated approach, via supporting the child through SEN support. While doing that, the school or the education setting is generally able to measure the impact the support is having on the child. And if they realise or are certain that the child is not making progress, therefore the school or the parents consider requesting an EHC needs assessment. Next question is, what are the timescales for requesting an EHCP? So generally, when we receive a request, the date we receive the request is, if you like, the start date. So within 6 weeks of receiving the request, the local authority must make a decision whether to assess the needs of the child or not. And they obviously have to communicate the decision in writing. If the decision is to assess, within 16 weeks from the first date, again, the local authority needs to decide whether they're going to be issuing the plan or not. And then if they decide to issue the plan, then it must be issued within 20 weeks of the original date. Okay. Next question is, what should I do if my child is not coping well at school, but the schools are not seeing this and they want to apply for an educational health and care needs assessment? So I really believe strongly that it's important that we all work together for the benefit of the child. And I think generally it works better if relationships are good. So what I would suggest is that the parents try to engage with the school to kind of explain their concerns and to have like an open discussions. And obviously they might seek support from IAS, maybe in meeting with the schools, sort of as an advocate role, but also ultimately parents can request an EHC needs assessment themselves. And the last question I have in this section is, my child doesn't have a diagnosis, can the school still apply for an educational health and care needs assessment? And the answer is simply yes. Okay. So any questions related to the process?
Thank you, Paola. There has been some questions. I'm going to ask Claire. Claire, are you all right? Claire Watson, are you all right to unmute and ask your questions?
Yes. So how do you start the EHCP process if you electively home educate your child but are planning on them going back to school? How do I start it? Because I've looked at all the forms and it all looks fantastic if you're already in school. How do I do that as a parent who's home educating?
So I think what the legislation say is that you obviously need to provide whatever evidence you have. So as a parent, if you don't have additional evidence from the schools, you can still provide whatever evidence you have. So if you're home educating your child, you would, I assume you would have a record of the learning programs that they're following, what they're struggling with, what's working well. Are they supported by any other professional, and what are the views of the professionals in their remit? How is whatever the need of the child is impacting on their education? So any evidence like that is appropriate. And obviously there is a form, you're right, on the local offer, there is a form, and you can obviously complete as much information as you can.
There isn't actually very much that you can complete as a parent on it, because it asks, there's a whole massive section which is from that the school have to fill in. Well, I'm the teacher at the moment, so do I fill that in my name, or
you would fill in, because if you're providing a learning program, and you can provide the information as a teacher, really, you provide it according to what your role is, really. Yes. Okay,
brilliant, thank you. That's my question done on that bit.
Okay, thank you, Claire.
Thanks, Claire. We've got a lady called Helen that would like to ask a question. I can't see you, Helen, because I can only see one screen, but are you okay to unmute and ask your question? Oh, I can see you now. Hi, Helen.
Yeah, my question might go on a bit. My daughter was only diagnosed ASD at the age of a month off 14. She'd had problems for years, but it was always put down to other things. She went to a very small primary school, and I think her problems were masked. I've had problems in her senior school, which I won't mention at the moment, since year 7. In year 7, she obviously struggled with the size of the environment. She started self-harming. She's now fully non-attendant at school. She's got mental health issues. I've filled out the EHCP form. The school, during a SIN meeting, because she's now a child in need, told me that she didn't qualify. The IAS lady said quite clearly she does, and there is evidence by the mere fact that she is non-attendant. If you read the school's response to or their completion of the form, we are talking about 2 completely different children. I feel that the school have put as little information on the form as possible. They are basically trying to say, I believe, and according to the way the IAS lady is reading it, that if they support her, she will be able to go into school. Well, clearly the support they have provided since year 7 has not worked. And I just feel as if at every turn I'm banging my head against a brick wall with the school. And I really don't know what to do, because she is quite keen to go back to school, but I'm not sure that a mainstream school is okay for her, because I don't think she can cope with a class size of between 30 and 35. And I just don't know what to do to, I mean, I'm trying to organise another meeting with the school to go through my concerns, but having already told me they don't think she qualifies, I just feel that they're putting up as many barriers as they can as possible to fill the form out.
So are you saying, Helen, that you haven't put a request through because the school is saying that she doesn't qualify? Is that right? I filled out my section. I sent all the CAMHS reports because she's been hospitalised, not for anything too minor, thank goodness. But I've put down all my details about panic attacks, the mental health problems, the self-harming, and everything else. And basically, I think on the school's response, we're talking about every question is really only answered with 1 sentence. So they've not, to my mind, that, as I say, they are doing as little as possible to complete the form as well as they could. Her head of year is saying that there is no more the school can do for her, but the SENCO is telling me if she goes into school, they will support her and she will be fine, which is clearly not the case, because she's been getting progressively worse since year 7 and is now fully non-attendant. She's getting no work sent to her at home. So I found it quite bizarre that she was getting grades of 1 for excellent for homework and 2 for attendance and work at school when she actually isn't even at school. So even the school reports seem nonsensical to me. And of course, GCSE year next year, I'm worried about, and I refuse to let them send the form in. As far as I'm aware, they haven't, but I refuse to let them send it in because I just don't think they filled it out properly. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like there's conflicting information from the head of years and the SENCO.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bit you kind of caught in the middle, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as I was saying, I mean, you got the support from IAS, and I think I would kind of strongly recommend that it's as best as possible to have sort of an open communication with the school, in order. I mean, you can present a request at any time if you want to, but obviously, panel would make a decision according to the evidence that is received, because it's just the way that we can do it impartially, really, to anybody. So I think my suggestion would be that you try maybe with the support of IAS to kind of, you know, to build bridges with the school so that you can provide the evidence that is needed.
And if they still won't provide it, do you look at I mean, if I sent it in now, looking at it objectively from my point of view, if I was you and I was reading the report that was sent in, I wouldn't grant her an EHCP, because what they've said is, to me, is not good enough. However, if you read what I've put as the parent, so do you take the parent's view of the child into consideration as well as the school, or is it sort of 75-25 towards what the school evidence?
We take everybody's evidence in consideration. So when there is a conflicting, like you're saying, conflicting evidence, it becomes tricky. But I would say if you feel really strongly that you can't, build bridges with the school and it's not working, put it through.
Okay.
I would say put it through at the end of the day. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Helen. And I can sympathise, because we do hear a lot of these situations, especially with girls, where they mask really well at school, and so school aren't seeing the behaviour that you're seeing and the need that you're seeing at home. So I don't think you're alone with having that situation. So thank you, Helen. And I was just wondering whether or not the area Senko could be of some help with speaking with the school. That might be an opportunity as well. I'm not sure. There's a lady called Kelly Nash who is the area Senko, and whether she might be able to support the Senko at the school that your daughter's registered with.
I didn't even know there was an area Senko.
Yeah, it might be worthwhile. Helen, if you would email Way, who you got the codes from,
yeah,
we could perhaps put you in touch with her. Would that be a solution, just for trying to think of ways to help you?
That's a really good
anything
idea
to help, to be honest, because it's just she's losing out, and at the end of the day she's not a happy child, and that's what we all want for our children, and it's just not happening at the moment.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. I'm going to move on, just because we've had quite a lot of questions,
Yeah.
Paola, so I hope you're ready for them. Right,
Okay.
Get your brain ready. Somebody asked about the timescales, and it was a really good question. They asked, do the week state in time include term time weeks, or is 52 weeks of the year?
Sorry, I didn't hear that because the sound went a bit funny. I'm trying to find the question so that I can look at it. Is it?
Yeah, it was from a lady called Jenny, and she asked about timescales. Are they just for the term time only? So the 20-week statutory time frame for an EHCP, is that just term time
yes,
only?
Term time only. Well, obviously, during the summer holidays, because the schools are closed over 4 weeks, then assessment could be delayed because of that. I think for information purposes, we generally are quite good at meeting the statutory deadline within the time frame. It purely, in my point of view, is because it's really important that if we decided a plan needs to be issued, I really feel strongly that a plan needs to be issued so that the support can be put in place and the child can be supported. So we generally do that, but normally there are exceptions only during the summer holidays.
Thank you, Paola. And we have another question, and it's on the chat, so you could probably have a quick look, but I'll read it out. It says, how do you start the process for a 3-year-old child who joined nursery in September? They've got a diagnosis, a genetic mutation, which causes delays in development, and this child also has DLA. So sort of, how does that work?
So generally, we've got the early years support team in the local authority. We also have an early years Senko, Helen McHale. So it might be useful to kind of have sort of be in touch with them. And normally, all children that have complex needs at a very early age, they normally get highlighted to us from the early years team, really. But again, as I said, if your child is being in education, even sort of at preschool, and if there's any evidence of preschools putting in place support and the child not making progress, they can support parents in putting in a request, or parents ultimately can always submit a request independently.
If that family aren't in contact with any early years teams, how would they do that, Paola? Is there a
So from a kind of panel point of view, it becomes a little tricky. Obviously, we will consider any request, but it becomes tricky because obviously what we need to be looking at is how are the child needs impacting the child within an education setting. So it's really important to see that so that the child can be assessed appropriately, and therefore you can see what needs to be put in place for the child to be supported in an education setting. So there might be an element on sometimes we would have conversation where we would say, can we wait till the child has started in a setting so that they can be properly assessed? For example, when we talk about education, health and care needs assessment, for professionals, when a child is under assessment, it's really important for them to see the child majority of the time in the education setting, isn't it? So that they can really establish the support that the child needs.
So the next question is quite similar to that. Kim, does that answer your question? I want to make sure that, because Kim's got a son that's 5 and at school, and she believes that the process wasn't due to start till 6. So I think that's definitely not correct. But does that answer your question enough to know that you can apply for one now and the school can apply for one now, but often they like to have some evidence and some information that they can use that is good. I can't think of the word that I'm looking for, but it's evidence for the
it shows basically it shows how a child is coping within an education setting so that it can be assessed appropriately, really. So I think that's very important, because I mean, like we were talking earlier about, older girls that maybe have autistic traits and they're not coping well. They might be coping well at school, but not at home, and so on. It's really important to see how a child is coping within the education setting.
Could I just clarify the question about whether or not the statutory timescales are term time only? From my belief, it is 52 weeks of the year, the statutory timescales. But what you're saying, Paola, is that because schools are closed for 4 weeks during August, that could cause a delay. So it could be that your EHCP could be 24 weeks if your process is going over a summer period. Is that what you meant?
That's exactly what the code of practice say. However, what I was saying is that generally in our local authority we tend to be quite good at meeting the deadline over the summer as well, obviously, but it's quite rare that a plan is being delayed.
Brilliant. And I've just got a couple more questions. If you have a prognosis that means a lifelong condition of a learning disability, is it normal to still delay an EHCP? I'm not 100% sure, Cassie, about your question. Do you want to unmute? Are you all right to unmute? I just want to make sure we get it answered for you.
So my daughter has a genetic mutation that causes learning disability, amongst other issues. So we know that she's going to have learning issues for life. So obviously that means, she's going to need extra help for all of her educational setting. So if we've got that prognosis, is it normal to still delay an EHCP when at some point she's definitely going to require one for her life, if that makes sense?
Is she in an education setting?
She's in mainstream school at present, yes.
Right. So it's always about how are the needs of a child, special educational needs of a child, impacting on the education. So if they are impacting on the education, then the school should implement a graduated approach. So I would assume that the SENCO in the school, on your child's schools, would have sort of implemented a graduated approach to kind of register or check, monitor the impact that the needs are having on the education. And then if they see that obviously your child is not making progress, then they would say, we really need to be putting in a request. Is that what they're doing? Do you have meetings?
So yeah, so that ties in with my other question. So she's got, she's sort of been having the plan, do, review system. We've just had a IEP, but so she's making progress according to those sort of targets, but they're completely not relevant to her peers. So she's making progress, but she's still way below all of her peers. So so yeah, it's the fact that she's making progress, that she's learning 5 numbers, is that enough, or should they be applying for an EHCP because she's still way below her peers despite, you know, meeting targets?
I think obviously I can't comment particularly on your daughter's child case, because I don't really know the whole of the details. But in my view, if I were in your position, it's a question that I would be discussing with the SENCO. So to, you know, what do they think? It's kind of going forward. Is that because I suppose it's kind of worth bearing in mind that not all children at school are working at the same level. Everybody is kind of working at different levels. So I suppose as educators, they would be in a position of saying, this is okay, and there's still scope for progress, or maybe not. This is like a red flag alert, and we should really consider it. So is that a conversation that you've had with the SENCO?
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed sort of potentially applying for an EHCP, but it's sort of, you know, not just yet kind of conversation. So
yeah,
because she's making little progress.
Yeah, and I think in my view, as a parent, I would say if it's not just yet, what are we waiting for? What is the reasoning, the rationale behind? I would be asking these questions really, just to get an understanding of what the plan is. There should always be a plan, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah.
Can I just ask a question, Paola? I'm interested to know about the process, and sorry if you've explained it and I haven't understood it, but the educational psychologist. So when you ask for an education, health and needs assessment, what happens then? Like, can you explain to everyone on the call about the role of the educational psychologist, the EP?
So when we agree, when the local authority agrees that the assessment can go ahead, there's always going to be an educational psychologist assessment. That's just a standard request. We always request advice from educational psychologists, social care, any potential professional that is involved, people like speech and language or occupational therapists, and pediatricians. And for example, there was a question further down the line about CAMS. We ask requests to anybody who is involved, really. Nevertheless, I think some schools, when they feel that they've implemented a graduated approach and they feel that the child is still not making progress, they would request for an educational psychologist assessment prior to submitting the request. But that's not necessarily, it's not something that must happen.
I was just thinking for Helen's daughter, that could be quite useful, because it's almost like someone else to view the child's ability and needs in a school environment. And I know from my own personal EHCP story, that EAP report was sort of like the golden report, I suppose, that really helped us to get what we needed.
That's true, but it's always very important to bear in mind that obviously the child needs to be in the school, though, for the educational psychologist to have a proper assessment. If you think about it, that's the thing.
What would happen for a child that was out of school or is being home educated? How would the EP then, and you'd agree to do an EHCP needs assessment?
It still obviously happens. It's still the educational psychologist still would assess the child, but I think we always, I suppose, go back to the fact that what is the education, health and care plan for? The education, health and care plan provides additional support to a child which is in an education setting so that the child can, make progress in relation to the intended outcomes. So therefore, it makes sense for the child to be in the setting. Obviously, there are exceptions to the cases. If a child is being home educated, we have children that maybe are in hospital situations and so on, that still applies.
So one last question, and I'll let you move on because I know, but this is quite a big subject, the EHCP process.
Yes, of course.
A question that we've been asked is about if your child isn't in the right school and you have an EHCP process and you get an EHCP, at what point can you then suggest that that school's not right for that child and you need to look for either an alternative provision or some other kind of package? What other opportunities are available for that child?
So if a child has an education, health and care plan, there's two situations going on here. So if a child is under assessment and we've agreed that the plan needs to be issued, so we're at a stage that we're saying we're issuing a draft, when that happens, the assessment coordinator would have a conversation with the parents, and among other things, they would say, what would you like us to consider for your child as a setting? Because when a child does an education, health and care plan, a setting always needs to be identified through a consultation process. So that conversation would happen, and in some cases the parents would say, I want my child to remain in the current school, or they say, I want you to consult with such and such school, and we would do that. The different situation can be when a child already has a plan, is already at a school, and the parent feel that the school is not meeting the needs. So in that case, the parent should ask the school to hold an annual review, and that should be discussed. So within an annual review situation. So in the annual review, would expect the plan to be looked at section B, have the needs change, the intended outcomes, do they need changing, provision needs changing, and then we would want the school to record what are their views, do they think they can still meet the child's needs, and what are the parents' views, what do the parents want, and then that comes back to the local authority for the local authority to make a decision.
Thank you. I think, shall I let you carry on with your other questions?
Yeah, that's okay. I think some of the questions, I believe we kind of started to answer already, but I'm still going to go on to it. So the next section, there's just literally 2 questions related to it, so I'm open to more, and it's relating to the annual review process. The first question says, the school have not had an annual review with my child in the last 12 months. What should I do? Please contact the school and ask them to hold an annual review. That definitely has to happen. I will kind of develop a little bit more in my next questions. So, and the next answer to the next question. So the next question is, we've had an annual review a few months ago. There were changes to my child's plan, but I've not received the amended document. So just to bear in mind that plans are not meant to be amended constantly and all the time. We tend to amend plans when there are significant changes. However, I have to be honest, it is very difficult for most local authority, including ours, to process annual reviews. So this is something that we've been struggling with. And we've been really lucky that our local authority has agreed for us to allow to have an annual review officer post. So we're currently advertising for it, and we're hoping that once the person is in place, that would be able to kind of help us process the annual reviews in a more, timely manner, if you like.
We do have a question, and I think Claire Watson is going to ask it.
Hello. So with the annual review, So I spoke earlier on about my daughter and the application. So I do have a son in a special school with a plan. Every year, the local authority, obviously, are invited to his annual review. He's now 14 and they've been once. Why does nobody come?
Because, well, first of all, we don't need to come. We don't necessarily need to come. We can't possibly come to all the annual reviews. What we tend to be focusing on is the phase transfer reviews. So in the summer term of the year before your child moves to the next setting, let's say, for example, if your child is in year 5, the year before in the summer term, they would have transition reviews, and that's the reviews that we aim to attend. We also, what we tend to do is, and we've done already, in preparation for the summer term, before the start of the summer term, all the assessment coordinators have emailed all the centres in all the schools saying, this particular children should have an annual review in the summer term because we're looking at transition in preparation for phase transfer next year. Could you let me know whether there's any review that you think I definitely must attend? Is there going to be any issues? Or do you think the parents would want to attend? If not, we always say, if following the review, if parents has any questions, they're very welcome to contact the assessment coordinator for any information regarding the process with phase transfer and so on. So that's just the answer, I'm afraid, Claire.
Okay, so how do we know who our assessment coordinator is if nobody ever even sends an apology for not coming? I don't know who to contact.
So the school knows who your assessment coordinator is because assessment coordinators are connected to schools. Again, that's another answer I was going to answer further on. So what happens is each school has an allocated assessment coordinator. There is a lot of communication generally between assessment coordinator and schools.
Is that the same if it's an independent special school that's not in borough?
Yes, they all have assessment coordinators allocated.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you ever, again, it's something that I was going to answer further on. If you ever have any query regarding that, we've got sort of a general email address you can email asking questions,
okay.
And I will give you the address later on. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you.
Because, to be honest, at the end of the day, I mean, we are lucky. We have quite an experienced team, and they've been in the team for a while, but it is one of these roles where staff change quite often. So at the end of the day, the whole of the team should be able to support parents and answer questions, in my view.
Okay, thank you. Just on the side of that last bit that you said, though, I've got to be totally honest, it doesn't fill parents with confidence when you tell us that there's a high staff turnover.
Generally, I mean, I don't know whether you were not aware about it. This is all over the country. It's not in our local authority. I said we're really fortunate that the staff in our team is constant, and but it's just generally the rule all over the country, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
And I just wanted to pass over to Catherine now. Catherine, did you want to ask your question, or did it get answered already?
Hi, thank you. It got semi answered. I couldn't remember the last lady that was speaking her name, but I would echo her comments with regards to attendance. I understand what you're saying from a borough perspective. So one of the first things that you said, Paola, on the previous question was that the report shouldn't get updated unless there's significant changes, which I understand. However, my daughter's report, which we looked at back in November, she's just turned 6, and it still highlights that she is 4. Sometimes in the report, she is a he. It's full of basic mistakes. And when I had my review with the coordinator from the school, she's at Manor Green School, when I had my meeting with the coordinator, she said, well, I don't have access to the actual report. And I said, I'm happy to do the report. And so what I did was I'm allowed you know, a printed piece of paper, printed copy. So I've done this 3 times now, sent my feedback saying she is a she, not a he. She is not 4, she is 6. She can walk, which is the report says she cannot walk. She learned to walk at 4.5. And it's just not getting updated. And I just want to understand why we're not allowed to access our child's report. I have a soft copy that we can edit so that at least from my end, it's updated. Whether or not I can then get my EHCP coordinator in the room for the meeting or not, that's another challenge, but it's wrong. So I have my meeting every year, and I you know, the COVID excuse or COVID answer can come up for everything, but it was completely pointless, completely wasted everyone's time because it was out of date, irrelevant. What do you do there? What would you suggest?
Yeah, no, thank you, Catherine. Sorry, I think I gather everything. I struggle to hear everything, but I completely agree. No, it's okay. I completely agree with you. I think it's not right if the document refers to he and she. That's just not acceptable. And also, if there are changes like you know, being able to work, not being able to work, that needs to be changed. I completely agree with that. So I would suggest if you just kind of let me have your child's name, I will kind of message the assessment coordinator. That is a significant change, and that's important that is amended. But also you should be able to get a Word copy of the plan that you can amend and then send back.
I have been told so many times, and without wanting to be rude, I've assumed it was a litigious, a legal perspective from your, I don't know why. I've been told, I mean, I don't want to name names in this group, but I know who my coordinator is, or at least was before the pandemic. And I know who my coordinator from the school is. I've never been able to have a document I can amend, and I was told I was not allowed that because the coordinator at the borough has to update it, which then follows on from the previous lady who was talking that I can't get the coordinator to any of the meetings, so that it just doesn't get updated. Last November, I wrote all of my amends and sent them into the school, and the school promised to pick up, and I haven't heard back from them either. So so I feel like I'm being let down.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, no, if you do let me know your child's name, I will, because you can. I mean, obviously, it is the assessment coordinator that then considers your amendments and then provides the proposed amended and then finalised. But you can amend a Word copy of a plan. That's actually sometimes I find it really useful, particularly obviously if it's highlighted what has been amended or what's being proposed. So that's kind of easier for the assessment coordinator to look at and consider.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And if you wanted Catherine to send that to us, we can forward that on to Paola for you. Happy to do that.
Great, thank you, I will. Thank you.
So, I've got another question, and it's on the chat, Paola, so you can probably see it. How does the points eligibility criteria work in terms of initiating an EHCP assessment? Our son has ASD and has an individual education plan, and the educational psychologist has assessed, but SENCO has advised he may not qualify. As parents, we believe he does. Can you explain that process?
Yeah, again, it's very difficult to kind of, there's not just a one size fits all, you know, it's about the individual request. I would always say, as I said earlier, that if a SENCO says that they might not qualify, that's their opinion. And as a parent, I would kind of ask the rationale behind it. Why does the SENCO believe that? Ultimately, a parent can submit a request as much as anybody else. So that's all I can say. I mean, it's difficult to kind of talk about individual children without having, you know, evidence and reports, but yes.
If the family that asked that question, if you're not in touch with the IAS service, there's a lovely lady on here called Chris. I'm sure she'll give us a wave, but she's definitely someone that you can speak to about that, and I'm sure that she's helped quite a few number of people that are on our call today. So I would We'll, Wei, could you pop Chris's details in the chat so that people have contact for how to get hold of IAS? That'd be really great. So Paolo, shall I let you continue with the other questions?
Yeah. So the next group of questions is relating to communication with the team, the SEND team. So how do I contact the SEND team? So we've got a phone number, which is I can kind of, I mean, you can share the details, I suppose, but it's a landline that it's answered only during office hours. So for example, I would strongly recommend that if you phone and nobody answers the phone, please don't leave a message. Just during office hours, it should be answered. If not, even better, the CYPDS email. So cypds@achievingforchildren.org.uk. That is ideal because it's looked at by a number of people in business support. Our case officers look at that and then they can direct the email to the relevant person. Next question is, do you allocate case officers to individuals or do schools have an allocated case officer? Now, this is, there's a little bit of a difference. Like I was saying earlier, all schools have an allocated assessment coordinators. The SENCO should know who the assessment coordinator of the school is because they're often in communication. However, with regard to new assessment, we had established that there were some assessment coordinators that were getting an enormous amount of requests while others didn't. And to make it more even, we now try to allocate the new request to the assessment coordinator that is allocated to the school, but sometimes that might not happen. However, again, please be aware that when you send a letter that says the local authority has agreed to assess, the letter does give you the name and contact details of the assessment coordinator. So while you're under assessment, you should have details of your assessment coordinator. And the last question is, I've sent an email and didn't receive a reply. What should I do now? So we have 3 working days to respond to emails. So if you don't receive a response within 3 working days, I would chase them up. Again, if that doesn't work, you might want to try emailing CYPDS, and then normally what they would do is they probably, if it's one of the assessment coordinators in my team, they probably email me to point it out. Any other questions?
Any questions about communicating? Oh, is it post-SAM?
Yes, it is. It wasn't about communicating, actually. I put my hand up about any other questions. So I'm happy if you want to finish your section first.
That's okay. I mean, we've got questions coming regarding mediation and complaints at panel A and panel B. So if it's something different, we can answer it.
Okay, yeah, it touches a bit upon what a previous lady had said about a child masking. So I have a 5-year-old son who is in mainstream school, and he appears to cope amazingly well. But then the minute I pick him up, anything can trip him off to an absolute total meltdown. And we've noticed, because we transitioned him back into school since lockdown by doing half days, and then a 1 o'clock pickup, and then a 2 o'clock pickup, and then a 3 o'clock pickup. And we've just noticed that between the 2 and 3 o'clock pickup, those meltdowns have gone way off scale, and it's unmanageable, and it's really impacting on home life. We obviously see this, but the school don't have the evidence of that, because at school he's doing so well at trying his best to fit in. Where do we go from there? Because, you know, how do we get our evidence because to them, because they obviously, it's in 2 different settings. my son thinks it's a very long day, but you know, how is his voice heard in all of this, and how do we present our evidence to the school, because it's two separate things, and you know, they acknowledge it, but it feels a little bit difficult going forward because they haven't seen it. Do you have any advice on that?
I think normally what I know schools would say to parents is to potentially try to seek advice from early help, or sort of professionals, or sort of support groups outside, you know, maybe related to a diagnosis. For example, if a child has a diagnosis, there might be sort of support groups, or contact early help. I mean, some schools would support parents with referral to early help with regard to situation like that. Has that been mentioned to your school?
Yeah, briefly. They also mentioned about contacting GEMS and through to the other. He's autistic, and I've already had one-to-one contact with one of the charities, but because of their funding, that's like,
right,
we can't continue that conversation. Are there ever any instances where the borough would grant an EHCP for a child and actually allow them to have slightly reduced hours? Does that ever happen? Because I think my son can cope to a certain extent, and the school is helping him, but after, you know, there's after 2 o'clock, that's it. He's just switched off. He just can't cope anymore, and he's holding it in, and then it just exploding. Are there ever any instances where he has an EHCP already? Would the borough ever support a child leaving mainstream school slightly earlier every day?
I think if a child has an educational health and care plan, the local authority would allow reduced hours as a transition or progression into reintegrating full-time educations. I don't think we would support reduced hours ever ending sort of approach. Yeah, but as a plan to progress to reintegrating, yes, it does happen.
Okay, just because I think for us it's just about trying to work out what else we can do together, actually help him. I don't think it's, you know, I don't want it to be forever, but it's wrong at the moment, and we somehow need to dial it back so that he can just be on level ground and not be too challenged, and then try and work out how else we can support him.
So certainly, I think that there is potential, obviously, for a referral to early help to see whether any of the professionals attached to it, that it might be something that they can support with, really. So it might be something that you want to discuss with the school, or to do a joint referral, or individually.
Okay, thank you.
And he's still so young, isn't he? You know, those reasonable adjustments that the school could make should be put in place. And, you know, him leaving at 2 rather than at 3, and perhaps not attending things like assemblies and sports days, which will increase his anxiety at school, might be the thing that keeps him in education, you know. So I had to do that with my son. I'm speaking from experience. So, but you know, you want to do anything, don't you? Somebody suggested on the call that you could video the meltdowns after school and show them to school, just to show the type of, because I hear this a lot. You're not alone. I hear this a lot of young children when they leave school having terrible trouble transitioning from home to school, and either way around. We've got some more questions, Paola.
I can see the one from Jenny. about saying that it feels that a child needs to be failing in some way to be considered for an EHCP. I think it's about it's about children with needs and disabilities are supposed to be supported by schools. That's what I suppose. That's what the point is. They're supposed to be supported, and then support needs to be in place, and then monitored to see whether it's working or not. I suppose that's where we are coming from, really. I don't know whether it answers your questions, but
the situation I'm in is that he's being brilliantly supported in his junior school, and he isn't struggling because they're really helping him.
Right.
But senior school is a whole different animal. He has very little executive function. He is not going to be able to move himself from one classroom to another, so he's clearly going to struggle. I have no evidence of that because he's not there yet struggling. So do I have to let him go and start failing, which is just going to totally demoralize him? When really it's so obvious there's going to be a problem. Why not help him now? Why not get something in place so that the day he starts, there's someone there helping him, or tools in place?
But they should be helping him. That's what I'm saying. They should be helping him within SEN support.
But they can't help him from day one because he's not been there before for them to know what his issue.
But they should still, if a child has special educational needs without an educational health and care plan, they should still be supported with transition from primary to secondary. That's still something that should be happening. You don't have to have a plan for that, and they should still be supported, although they don't have a plan. That applies to all the schools, not just to primary schools.
So the senior school will be advised of things that will help him before he actually turns up.
There should be transitions in places, yes.
Right.
Okay. Between the education settings, there should be transition in places, yes.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Jenny, what might help you is there's a document on the local offer for RBWM called the Collaborative Responsibilities document. I'm sure Wei could put a link into the chat. And it's a really useful document because it shows what schools should be providing without an EHCP. So it's all about that SEN support, and SEN support is in the code of practice as something that has to happen. And something that I did when my son transitioned from primary to secondary is I held quite a few transition meetings that actually you could, either if your school won't help you with them, you could just set them up by yourself with the Senko at the senior school, secondary school. And it sometimes helps to do like a one-page profile about your son, about the things that will help him. Because what I found, and other people might find it too, is that they go from having one teacher where they're quite nurtured to having 6 or 7 teachers and a huge school. And each teacher, you wanted each teacher to know what his needs would be. And so I asked for this one-page profile to be given to all his teachers so that they would have an idea before he started what he needed. So Lisa's having to go. Thank you, Lisa, for joining us. I hope that helps, Jenny. And that collaborative responsibilities document is really useful, not just for you, but for everyone on this call. I really recommend having a look at it. It's quite a big document, so pick bits out that you need to know about. But and if you still need help, IIS will help you, or join some of our sessions and we'll try and give you some more advice. So sorry, I know it's gone past 12, but would you be okay, Paola, just to stay on a little bit longer?
I'm okay to stay on, yeah.
Okay, if anyone has to leave, please don't feel bad. We are recording, as you know, so you can always watch the end bit, but I'll let you carry on, Paola.
So I've just to say, I've made a note of Catherine's daughter's name, so don't worry about that. So we can move on to mediation and complaints. So the question was, I asked for an educational health and care needs assessment and we were refused. my child is not coping in school, I would like to appeal, how do I do this? So when the local authority makes a decision, if it's a decision to refuse an assessment, we send a letter. The letter has attached documentation that explains in details how to appeal. So generally the next steps are ways forward meeting or mediation. The difference between ways forward and mediation is that ways forward is informal. So it's just a meeting between parents, a member of the same team and other professionals involved. Mediation is official, proper mediation is formal. So it needs to be arranged by, we use a company called Global Mediation. They're not compulsory. Either of them are not compulsory, so you can go straight to appeal as long as you get a certificate from Global Mediation saying that you don't want to undertake mediation. And the next question is, the draft plan does not meet my child's needs. What do I do next? So for me, these questions raised some questions for me in order to answer, because if it's at a stage where it's during the assessment and we've issued a draft, have you spoken to the assessment coordinator about it? Have you asked for a meeting? Is it related to parts of the plan, for example, which are section B or section F, which are informed by professional reports? If it's information that we've taken from professional reports and you're not happy with it, have you spoken to the relevant professionals? So there's a lot of conversation that should be happening if you're not happy with a draft. That's what I'm saying. And obviously, potentially a meeting with the assessment coordinator and then the relevant professional would help. And the last question in this section is, my child's needs are not being met at school, even with an EHCP. I don't think he or she is in the right school. What do I do next? And I think that's, again, I've answered a little bit earlier in the sense that if a child is under assessment, when the local authority decides to issue the draft, you would be asked the questions. Who do you want us to consult with? And obviously we would consult with parental preference. We will also consult with LA preference, and then if they're different, responses are taken to panel for decisions. If it's the case that the child already has a plan and the child is in a school, you need to ask the school to hold an interim review to discuss concerns, to collate the child's views, the parents' views, and to record the ability of the school to continue to meet needs. These were my questions for mediation and complaints.
Is there any other questions about complaints or mediation? No, okay, happy to go on to the other questions, Paola.
Okay, so questions relating to panel A and panel B. So panel A, membership of panel A is the SEND manager, myself, a representative from the educational psychologist, a social care manager, a representative from specialist schools, a number of SENCOs from schools in Maidenhead attend. We have early year SENCO and your area SENCO that attend. And what we discuss at panel A are decision whether to assess or decision whether to issue. This is what we do at panel A. Panel B, membership panel B is the principal educational psychologist, a SEND manager, and then I attend, or my colleague Joanna Safa, who's the Preparing for Adult 2 manager, attends. We attend alternative weeks. Panel B, we get head teachers from Windsor and Maidenhead, we get social care managers, and the decisions discussed at panel B are decisions related to funding or whether a panel agrees to specialist mainstream for a child. So you know, when a parent say to us, I want you to consult with the specialist schools, local authority feel that the child's needs can be met at mainstream, we consult with both, and then the assessment coordinator takes to panel B for a decision. And there was a question related to panel, which was, I would also like to understand who from health sits on each of these panels and how the health input works, especially when the child, young person might have complex mental health needs. Unfortunately, we don't have anybody from health attending panel. We've had somebody from the CCG attending briefly to just get an understanding of how panel work, but they don't have capacity to attend panel. For any child that has health needs, including complex mental health needs, we always seek advice from relevant health professional. That's it.
Are they weekly, those panels?
Yes, they are. They are. So they are on a Wednesday for panel A and on a Thursday for panel B.
And Claire, you mentioned you had a question, Claire Watson.
Yes, I think today's been really informative. Thank you. And I appreciate you answering all the questions as best you can. My question I have is, everything you've said is great, and we could probably look all that information up online and find out them answers for ourselves. So what happens when what you're telling us will happen doesn't happen? Who do we contact then? Do we speak to you or somebody else? Because we know what the answers should be, but that isn't always the case. So where do we go then?
So the first port of contact should always be your assessment coordinator. So if you have any questions related to the education, health and care plan of your child, should be your assessment coordinator.
And if we don't get anywhere with them, like
if you don't get anywhere with them, as I was saying, if you email the general email address that is looked at by a number of people. So we have business support people that man that, but we also have the case officer in our team that man that. They all know who needs to be dealing with things, and generally, if, as I was saying, you know, earlier when I was saying that we've got 3 days to answer emails or telephone calls. If we don't, chase them up again. If you don't, you email, they would know, for example, who the case belongs to. So I would get copied into any response. So I would find out.
All right, lovely. Thank you.
That's okay.
If you don't know the name of your assessment coordinator, you go to your SENCO and ask who the assessment coordinator is. And if they come back and say to you, they can't give you that information, what would you do then? Would you email the CYPDS inbox and then ask who your coordinator is?
Yeah, I would be really shocked if they say that. I'm being honest. Our names should be available to anybody. We want to be open and transparent and communicating with people. And I would always say to schools, you know, when we were talking earlier about non-attendance to annual reviews, we would always say to the school, having had the review, if the parents have questions that you weren't able to answer, particularly regarding processes, give them my contact details, and they should give contact details for assessment coordinators. You know, recently, since last year, we've all been working remotely. We're working from home. We do go to the office occasionally, but it's quite rare because we have to book a desk. So mobile numbers are always at the end of each email address. You can contact CYPDS to ask for your assessment coordinator's mobile number or email address. That's not a problem at all. So we should be, I feel the parents should be able to contact their assessment coordinators, definitely.
Thank you, Paola. We've got 2 questions. That one is from Cassie and the other is from Kim. So Cassie, would it be useful to unmute and ask it? Because perhaps you might explain it.
That's it. Where was my question? My question is, so how do I know what extra help that an EHCP will provide? So I know if it's worth applying, because my daughter has input from speech and language. She has one-on-one time, she has small group work. We're awaiting occupational therapy and physiotherapy assessment again, because I've moved to the area. And she's had an educational psychologist assessment as well. But, you know, I don't know what more that an EHCP can provide to know to push for one? Like, you know, is it worth it? Is she getting absolutely everything? So yeah.
Yeah. So the schools and educational settings support children with special educational needs within SEN support, and it's really about additional support on top of that. So it's when a school supports a child within SEN support, they're monitoring the progress, they feel that the child is not making progress, they need to put more provision in place. So therefore, it's additional support on top of what they're receiving already, really. I can't really tell you exactly what would be, because each case is very individual, but it's support on top of the support that they're already receiving. And it's for everybody that is working with a child to establish whether that's needed.
Okay.
I know it doesn't really answer your question, but it's really difficult without knowing the child.
I wonder whether, Cassie, it could be that you need to, are you thinking more around like a social worker so that your child has access to, say, short breaks, for example? So that could be something else that you haven't explored. And we can perhaps do a talk about short breaks, because that would be useful for you to know about if your child has additional needs, and then they can have access to activities and things.
Yeah, so I think they do breaks for her, where they're doing like occupational type therapy type thing. So in my mind, she is getting a lot of input. Yeah, so I don't know what more that an EHCP can provide for her, if that makes sense. Yeah, to sort of be pushing for it. What's the ultimate goal? How much more sort of one-to-one can she have, or how much more small group, group work can she possibly have than what she is getting already? So is it that
I think they're usually outcomes led. Is that right, Paola? So
that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, you would set outcomes that you want for your child, your children, and that if then the additional support, I'll let Paola explain it, because she'll explain it much better than me.
I hope so. So yes. So when a child has an education, health and care plans, it's very much led by the intended outcome. So just a general example: if a child has speech and language expressive needs, an outcome could be for the child to be able to express their wish and wants. So that would be the outcome. And then we would think about the provision that needs to be put in place in order to get the additional support to provide that. Now, that could be different from all sorts of children. For a child, it could be something about pre-learning of vocabulary before a lesson. For another child, could be input, one-to-one input from a speech and language therapist or speech and language assistant. So that's why it's really difficult to quantify. But generally, it could be that a particular child is being appropriately supported at SEN support as they are now, but going forward, the support that they're not receiving, that doesn't help anymore. So therefore, an education, health and care plan would be beneficial.
Thank you. Is that helpful, Cassie? Is that?
Yes, yeah. I know, yeah. No, I do think I'm happy with sort of the provision that's being provided with, with the SEN provision at the minute. But yeah, I'm happy to monitor, because the school are doing, I think, the most that they can with her, and she's making those, or yeah, reaching those targets that they're setting, even if they are only small. So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Cassie.
I didn't want to be pushing the EHCP, defiantly, when maybe, I should, let the process go through.
And Kim, I'm keen to get your question answered, because I think I believe that the school are telling you that you can't apply for an EHCP until your child is 6. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what they told me.
Oh no. We have children at
He's only
preschool.
just been we had interviews a couple of weeks ago.
Sorry, I can't hear you very well.
I think your signal might be a bit on and off, but I think you've been told that he can't apply for one until he's 6 is not correct. They might be waiting to get more evidence, like he's possibly in year 1 at 6, is he? Or she, sorry.
He's in reception at the moment.
Which school is it at?
He's at St. Luke's.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that's the case at all. I'm a bit surprised.
Kim, feel free to go back to school and tell her that you can, you've been told by the Ehcp manager that you can apply for one before 6.
Okay, I will do, thank you.
And don't forget to use IAS. Please don't all email Chris, because I think she's about to shoot me and I got it wrong. So please don't all email Chris. Chris thankfully put the right email address in. Chris will be not wanting to be my friend anymore, I don't think. I was saying to email her, but do use IAS because they can point you in the right direction.
Can I just quickly say, Kim? Oh, excuse me, that's my work phone. Yeah, Kim, if you do want to contact me, actually, because I do quite a lot of work with your school, so please do come to me. Not a problem.
Wonderful. Isn't it great when you get to help all these people? It's really, really good. And Paola, I really do appreciate it, because it's all of us against you. I hope you don't feel like that. But you're answering questions so well. So thank you.
I'm pleased I am. It's important, in my view, that I provide the correct information. So I'm trying my best.
I just want to make sure we've asked all the questions, because there have been a few come in, and there's one here. It says, my child's needs due to ASD are largely but not exclusively because of her mental health condition with anxiety and depression, and what assessments would be needed for the EHCP?
So I suppose if it's this mental health issues, is she, dare say, known to CAMHS, and are they providing support? Because it's a bit of a struggle at the moment, isn't it, getting support from CAMHS? But again, we have some support from the early help as well, so that's kind of worth a referral to.
It is really difficult, and there's something called EBSA, which is sort of a new terminology that people are using, and it's called emotionally based school, is it refusal? School avoidance. Yeah. So EBSA, emotionally based school avoidance. And that, Helen, is probably what your daughter would be seen under. And I know that from a PACEIT point of view, we're working with the local authority on producing more guides and more support for those children, because they're seeing more children with these in this situation. And so the local authority are working really hard to try and get some support for schools. There's actually quite a lot of support that's happening at the moment. There's something called the Mental Health Schools team that we did a talk about a few weeks ago, which was really interesting, and we've got a recording of that. So if you perhaps Way could share that link on our web page or on our chat group here. But it's very interesting, the fact that they're going to be providing mental health, I think they called them practitioners, or I can't remember what they called them, but they're professionals that are going to be working in schools, helping children earlier for earlier identification of those needs. and it's a really good project. They're still in training at the moment, so I don't think the project goes live until September. Yeah. Have we answered everybody's question? If we haven't, oh, thanks, Wei. Wei's just popped. If you don't know how to do it, if you go to chat, you can click on that link and that takes you to the YouTube of that talk that we did. I think that's everybody's questions, but I'm worried that it isn't. So if it isn't, please make yourself known now, because I wouldn't want you to leave without having your question heard.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I've just clicked on the link. Can you remind me, because it's just come up with loads of videos, which one am I supposed to be looking at for the mental health issue?
I think if you look at one that was called Wellbeing.
Right. Okay. I might have to try and negotiate my way around this, because I've got Health Watch, mental health workshop, safe return to school, sensory processing and preparing for adulthood. They're the only ones coming up at the moment. Do I need to go in the library or something?
No, I think you'll probably find it under the mental health one. It was the one before Health Watch.
All right, okay. I've just pressed buttons now, not knowing what I'm doing, and come off it. So I'll have a look. I'll go back on it and see if I can find it. So what's it actually called?
Was it called Wellbeing, Way? Sorry, I can't go on it, but it's called the mental health one, Helen.
Oh, it's the mental health one, right? Sorry to be dense. I'm not very good on computers.
No, it's all right. And Jenny, the video that there about sensory issues, you might find useful for your son in transitioning. There was some useful tips. The sensory talk I thought was really good, and there might be some useful tips about with preparation for because a lot of children that suffer with anxiety at school, some of the sensory techniques, some of the sensory interventions, which are really easy and like schools would be able to provide, might be supportive to. And they, you know, they're simple things like fiddle toys and, you know, glue tack in your pocket and things like that. So
I'll give that a look then. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Paola. It's been a really interesting morning. I thank you so much, and I hope you might come on again, and perhaps
anytime.
Next term we could do another session like this, because it's really useful and I'd really appreciate it. And if anyone's got any comments about other types of talks they'd like us to do, please let us know, because I think I picked up a little bit earlier around perhaps what the role of a Senko is, and how maybe we could ask someone to come and do some work around like what schools can do to help our children. That might be useful. I'll see if I can find a willing volunteer.
Kelly would be a good person to ask to, Kelly Nash.
Yeah, I think we'll perhaps try to do that. So keep an eye out on all our newsletters and our Facebook. And if anyone wants to be more involved in PACEIT, please let us know, because we're a growing team, and we're always looking for parents that are willing to be parent reps with us, to perhaps have more. What the work we do is about going to meetings and actually, you know, being part of the decision making for services and provision in the borough. And if anyone has a passion for that, we're always looking for people to join us. So thank you for that. Right. And I hope you will have a lovely day. Thank you so much.
And you take care.